Hello, everyone, and welcome to Detention, where we think about what we've done and how to improve upon those mistakes. It's a new year, and although the specter of the COVID-19 pandemic looms over the world and over our athletic pursuits, we're going to be optimistic and talk about setting some goals for the upcoming season.
Hello, everybody. Goal setting is as old as we are as a people, but many athletes only pay lip service to this crucial part of skill development. A good goal is like a map showing you where you are, where you're headed, and a probable path to get there. Today on Detention, we're going to talk about some different goal setting strategies, ask each other about our goals, and answer your questions on the subject. So, welcome to Detention. You can't leave until we say so.
It's accurate. It's true. First of all, we want to give you a big caveat that goal setting can only cajole, channel, and direct motivation. It can't create the actual doing. Unfortunately, you are responsible for the actual doing. So just saying that I want to be a Cat 1 cyclist is all well and good, but we want you to remember that there's a lot more work to be done after setting the goal, and that work is the really hard stuff. On the other hand, if you don't put anything out there about what you'd like to do with your season, you're really just flailing around in the dark and hoping that you'll achieve your goals almost by accident. So you know how that ends with someone getting their eye poked out. It's terrible.
Yeah,
It's terrible.
that's how it always happened with
It
me.
is. It's true. It's true.
The second big caveat that we want to point out here is that what we're really talking about tonight is habit change. Um, if you know that you need to get into the pool every morning to achieve those goals that you've put out there, but you really suck at getting out of bed, no amount of like writing down a goal like I will get out of bed 5 out of 7 days of the week, it's not going to end up doing it. So once you've got those goals set, you need to also look at like how you are setting yourself up to actually achieve those goals in terms of your habits. And we'll get into that at the very end of the show today. But Molly, how in the world do I know what I should even be like, what I should pick to work on this year?
Well, Chris, that's the first thing that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how you select those goals that you identify. And our first answer is our favorite answer, which is that it depends. It really depends on the athlete. It depends on the number of years that you've been spending in the sport. It depends on your life and your circumstances. We recommend really spending some time figuring out what goals are meaningful for you and how those goals fit into your life. So a lot of times people say, I would like to participate in an Ironman this year. I'd like to complete an Ironman this year. But a lot of folks who are doing that, especially for the first time, don't recognize that amount of training really can't realistically fit into their lives as it stands right now. Especially without making significant sacrifices. And we know that sacrifices are part of the sport. But those sacrifices tend to be a lot easier to make if you make them slowly over a period of time. You don't surprise everyone in your life with them, which is why it's good to scale up in distance over the course of your career as an Ironman. So we want you to really think about and weigh what you're willing to give up in pursuit of your goals, and how important those sacrifices are to you. Like, if you would love to complete an Ironman, but you're really not, like, when you think about it, you're not willing to make some of the sacrifices that are necessary to make in order to pursue that, then that's not a goal that's going to be meaningful for you. It's going to be that balance of happiness and sacrifice is something that's really personal to the individual athlete. Don't feel compelled to chase a goal just because it feels like you should, or like that should be the next step, or it's what everyone else is doing. We really want you to do something that is going to make you feel proud at the end of the day without taking away from your life in a way that feels unsustainable.
How would you like, what are some ways that you have like worked with athletes to help them like work through how much like sacrifice they're able to give?
So I think that the time commitment for Ironman is really one of the. I mean, there are so many things that we commit to in this sport, between, spending money on a new bike, or having to like I remember when I trained for my first Ironman, I was in grad school, and the amount of money that I was literally eating was like almost too much for me. Like I was eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches like 10 times a day. I was so hungry. So like, do you have do you have the resources necessary to participate in the goals like that are really going to mean something to you? And for example, I think that for Ironman, one of the biggest things that people struggle with is the hourly commitment. And you don't have to train 40 hours a week to be an Ironman, and you don't have to train 40 hours a week to be a successful Ironman. In fact, most people really shouldn't train 40 hours a week. But I think that people still underestimate the amount of time that it takes to train. So if you think about, for a new triathlete, for a first-time Ironman, having a biggest week that's in the 14 to 15-hour range is not out of the realm of possibility. It's pretty likely that it's going to be somewhere in there. So if you think about that time and break it down by day and break it down over the weekend, and maybe there's a day that you prefer not to train, so that takes one day out of that 15 hours, think about what that realistically represents in your life and like the amount of hours that you'll have to come up with over that time, and really plug it into your day to day, like with the hours that you work and the requirements that you have with your family, your responsibilities in and outside of training. Think about like schedule that in, go through the actual exercise of finding that time in your schedule and seeing if it's possible. That is really another reason why I think that gradual scale up is better, because it lets you make that time and without having to make so much of it all at once.
Yeah, you're doing the slow boil on the frog.
Exactly. You want that frog to
Yeah.
boil for as long as possible.
Yeah, yeah. If you throw a frog into boiling water,
Yeah.
you know what happens. But like, you want to get to your Ironman frog boil like steadily.
That's right. This is a disgusting
Deli-
metaphor, but it's true nonetheless.
Oh, I'm always trying. Okay, so you know what so you've worked with an athlete and like figured out like how much sacrifice they're willing to make. Say this athlete's like they've done that first year of like sprints and Olympics. Like, how do they now know what they should focus on in terms of their like sport development?
So I think that's another good question for newer athletes, or even for folks who've been doing this for a long time but really aren't sure what to focus on. Like, there are always things that are going to take our attention, or the things that we feel like there's an endless list of things that I wish I was better at, and I'm sure that that's true for many of us. If you're not sure where you should start, one of the things that I also recommend is that people take a look at where they rank in their age group relative to each of the sports. So like, maybe you got out of the water fourth, but you were 98th on the bike, and you were 25th on the run or something like that. You have some ideas there about where you can spend your time. So it's probably not on the swim. Like, you probably aren't going to gain that much. These aren't necessarily like, this doesn't have to apply to everyone, and like placing higher in your age group doesn't have to be a goal that people find meaningful. But if you're not sure where to start, I do think that's some good data just to look at and see where you could possibly spend some of that time relative to the rest of the field that you're racing with. What about you, Chris? What do you recommend to folks?
Let's see. So figuring out what to focus on. I mean, like, one of the things, so say we're talking about like another athlete, who doesn't have the like 4th, 98th, and 25th in their age group breakdown. Like, say we're talking to an athlete who is like, I was 40th in all three. Like, I don't know. Like, I seem pretty evenly matched in all of them. If this is an athlete that we haven't really quite gotten to like a real a burning thing that they want to achieve, I would say like, well, what's the thing that you like the most right now? Like, what are you getting the most like enjoyment and excitement out of? Because clearly, like, if that athlete is like, oh, I'm loving running, then you're like, okay, well, let's like feed that a little bit, and we'll see that athlete kind of improve probably in the run relative to the bike and the swim. and then maybe after they put in like 2 or 3 months of like a real run focus, and then they get to go and do like a running race, maybe they're like, okay, that was really fun, but like I've been kind of missing the bike now. And maybe that's a chance then to shift their goals to a different area. But yeah, I mean, I really think that, finding that place of enjoyment is really important, because we were talking about this right before we went live, like triathletes are so goal oriented and so outcome focused that they really can lose that, like, what is it that I really like about this? And leaning into that can be a really great place to start finding those goals.
Absolutely. What happens if that athlete focuses on the things that they like and gets better at the things that they like, and then ends up with that other thing that they don't like?
Let's see, is that other thing that they don't like an injury, or
No,
like a
like what
race
if
cancellation?
they're just not really I think people do this especially with the swim. Not only because it's so technical, which I think a lot of people struggle with, but also because it is such a pain. Like
Mhm.
motivating to go to the gym and, like, assuming you have access to one, go to the gym, get wet, have to like take a shower, go home cold. Like, a lot of people do find that challenging, even if they don't hate swimming. What do you recommend for folks who are kind of facing that?
So like somebody who enjoys the aspect of it but is not excited about the sort of ancillary things around it.
Yeah, I think so. Or I think just struggling with, like, not enjoying the sports that they're
Okay.
training for.
Yeah. Phew. Well, if they're not enjoying any of the sports, then we're having a different conversation.
Absolutely.
um, if and then I would say that, especially coming off of 2020 and the early parts of 2021, that like there's like a certain amount of like, well, that's okay, we don't really need to like go over there right now. Like, if you're really hating running, like maybe we can just like touch it a few times a week and not make it a big focus. I think, and while we were like perhaps avoiding the pool, I think that one of the goals that I would try to get that athlete to set would be around like figuring out what's going on, and be like, okay, over the course of the next 3 months, like, let's figure out what it is that you're disliking about the process of swimming so much. And try to unpack that a little bit to like get them back, so they, like, even just like setting a goal of enjoying swimming again, and trying to figure out like what is standing in the way of that, and then pulling those roadblocks away. And like, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later with like triggers and stuff, but like that athlete who wants to get up and go swim early, but they just like roll over and hit the snooze alarm every time. Figuring out ways to sort of hack that process. So instead of hitting snooze, they like do something else that gets them started on the way to the pool. Because a lot of the times it's like, it's not the actual thing that the athlete dislikes, I've found. It's like, it's the stuff associated with the thing. So it's like, oh, like I have to set up my trainer, I have to connect it to Zwift, I have to get the stupid Bluetooth to work. Like, oh, I have to like put on all of these clothes to go running because it's 38 degrees and raining outside. And like removing some of that stuff, or showing the athlete that that's the thing that they don't like, is I think a productive way to maybe get them headed back in the correct direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can convince yourself that you don't enjoy something, and you can convince yourself that you do. And really practicing that mental approach to training is critical, I think, for
Mm-hmm.
athletes who struggle with that. Like, but I don't like to do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Learning to love swimming. I think that's the big one for a lot of us.
Hmm.
Is like I mean, like I disliked it for ages, and then one day like woke up and was like, I like swimming. And
I
after
like to
last
swim.
year, I really missed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of 2020, How do we deal with goals in like a post in like, well, not yet post, but in like a post pandemic kind of mindset?
I think that is something that we've been practicing a lot over the course of 2020 is how to be a little bit more resilient with our goal setting. I would definitely say a big disclaimer to all of the things that we're talking about tonight is that we don't want you to be too attached to your goals in 2020, especially if they are pinned on one race or one set of circumstances that you may not be able to control. Things are still uncertain. We are certain. The only things that we're certain about are that races will probably still be canceled or they will be changed in ways that make them different than what we were expecting. And I think that practicing resiliency for athletes is going to be really important this year. Making goals that aren't tied directly to race outcomes is also going to be really important this year. And also remembering that the people who put on these races are not trying to like take your money and run. They are doing the best that they can to create safe and fun experiences for athletes. And I think that in most cases, when they're canceled, the race director is devastated. So like it's something that that having a little bit of compassion for the folks who are trying to set this up and who are trying to do it safely is really important. I know it's discouraging when that event that you've been training for doesn't come off the way that that you wanted it to or doesn't come off at all. But it really like having some distance away from events and from goals, I think is going to be important this year.
Yeah. So speaking of which, now we're going to like get into some of these different kinds of goals that can really help us like stay away from just getting so attached to our event goals. Okay, so we're going to talk to you guys about 3 different kinds of goals. You have probably heard some of this before, but Molly, give us number 1.
Outcome goals. Outcome goals are number 1. What's an outcome goal, Chris?
So an outcome goal is going to be something like I want blank to happen. I want to win my age group at Chattanooga 70.3. I want to get on the podium at my local 10K. I want to run 40 minutes in a 10K, no matter what the course is like. They are pretty rigid. They are very black and white. There's good sides and bad sides to all of this stuff. Outcome goals are important because we need to set something that gets us in the ballpark. If I sit down with an athlete at the end of the year and I'm like, okay, what do you want to do next year? And they're like, I don't know. Then we can't even start. Like, I would so much rather have like a wildly unrealistic goal. Like if that athlete was like, I want to break 2 hours in the marathon, I'd be like, great, we're running. I know that much. I know that we're running, and I know that we're trying to get faster. Outcome goals can really get like a bad rap because they're so strict and rigid, and they can really set an athlete up for failure because of a whole bunch of other things that could happen. Like, if it's really, really hot on race day, if like 15 world champions in your age group like showed up for whatever reason to race your race, there's a whole bunch of things that are out of your control with outcome goals. But we do need them to kind of put us in the ballpark of what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Like if I sit down with an athlete that normally runs 45 minutes for a 10K, and I say something like, wouldn't you like to break an hour in a 10K? They're just gonna, it kind of doesn't compute. And so that's the first type of goal. Dangerous, but necessary.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
How about our next type?
Our next type of goal is performance goals. So I think these are the ones that your coaches love to hear about. I want to be able to hold 130 per 100 for a 1500 in training in the pool. or in open water. I guess they're very different things these days. So it's important, but it's really easy to kind of let that be the thing that that wags the dog. It's really easy to say to yourself, like, well, I held 130 pace for over 1500 in the pool, so that means that when I get into my race, I should be able to swim that pace over 1500. And then you swim that pace over 1500, or more commonly in our experience, people ride what the FTP, or at the percentage of FTP that they think they should be able to hold for a longer distance race, and then get off of the bike and start to run. And they're like, I don't know what happened, my nutrition. And you're like, no, dude, no, your brain did that to you. Yeah, I think that don't let those performance indicators rule your outcomes. Let those outcome goals be what they are. Like that perfect day of execution is built off of the attainment of those performance goals, but they should not be the things that you're using to dictate your performance on race day. One of the things that we were talking about earlier when we were getting ready for the broadcast today was like, so let's say that your goal is to break 6 hours in an Ironman on the bike. And you work on your FTP and you're in a place where like you think you could do that this year, and still have a solid run off the bike. But you show up to race day and it's 112 degrees and there's a headwind for 50% of the course, which is enough to make a huge difference. Yeah, I think that if you still hold on to those goals, to holding that very same wattage, to not listening to your body and to not listening to the conditions around you, your otherwise potentially great outcome is going to be sunk by your clinging to those performance goals.
Yeah. I think the other place that athletes like fall down with this is that they chase the performance goal in training. Mm-hmm. And I think FTP is the smoking gun here, where like there are, training plans and training cycles and like everything that is just focused on like make that FTP higher, like forgetting the fact that the end result is like traversing a real world experience in a shorter amount of time, and I think that like that's one of those performance goals that ends up like really getting away from people.
Absolutely. I think that, if you've been to previous episodes of Detention, you've heard that FTP does not extrapolate in the same way to especially to a longer distance race. So if you're planning on doing 112 miles and clinging only to that one number and what percentage of that number you should be able to hold, you are probably going to set yourself up for a very difficult day.
Yeah. All right. How about number 3? What are we talking about?
Process goals. What are process goals, Chris?
So process goals, like I think some process goals and performance goals sometimes overlap each other in ways that both can be helpful and less helpful. Mm-hmm. But a process goal is really like a technique or skill-based goal. So like, the example that, I usually talk to people about is like I want to raise my running cadence from my normal 84 strides per minute to like 88 strides per minute. It's a little bit less of a performance goal because you're not saying like, I want to do this kind of speed for this amount of time. It's really just like something you're trying to change about yourself as an athlete. So changing your cadence up. The swim is like a really, really great place for this. One of the athletes I work with has like a kind of pronounced scoop up at the front of his freestyle stroke. And so a real good process goal for him is just going to be, I want to remove that scoop up at the front of my stroke. It's not really a performance goal because nothing's getting performed. It's like a little piece of craft that he's working on. These are great. These are really important. But just like performance goals, we can easily lose sight of the big picture here, and just get focused on like making this little thing perfect, and then forget like, like I did a great job of removing that scoop up at the front of my stroke, but I've only been swimming 25s with 30 seconds rest in between, and I have absolutely no aerobic engine. And so it's like all of these goal uh, categories. Um, they're all important, and they all can be taken too far.
Absolutely. The only thing I will add to the process goals is that that is a really great time to start thinking about all of the little steps that go into racing that don't happen on the race course. Your mental approach to race day, what your like approach to your routine in the 24 to 72 days out from races. Nailing down that process can be incredibly helpful. It's a very sad experience as a coach to see an athlete who has like done the work, knows the plan, is ready to execute, and then like doesn't eat until like 10:30 the night before a race or something and like doesn't eat enough for dinner, can't find the food that they wanted. Like develop those processes and those habits as well. Those are super important.
I love that you just brought up like mental processes. Like, what's a example of like a mental process that you would want an athlete to work on, like in training, in performance? Like, what are some of those things that, because I think it's so easy to like forget about that stuff.
I think the main one I would love for people to focus on is giving up the negative self-talk. I think that that is something that like we can all kind of fall back on. It's something that's really easy to do. It lets us kind of like undercut our own expectations of ourselves and other people's expectations of us, and especially on race day of like you feel like you're not ready, and you feel like there are so many like uncertainties and feelings that make you wonder whether or not you're going to be successful. And I think that you are listening to yourself when you talk that way. And I think, a lot of folks sort of dial back their expectations on event day and listen to the other people around them who are getting anxious and stressed out, and listen to people who deal with that by like going the other way entirely, like overly inflated self-talk. And they're like, well, I didn't do those things and I'm not ready for that. And I didn't know about that hill. Like I think that the two parts of that are practicing some positive self-talk, and some positive like self-coaching. And also practicing tuning out the noise on race day, because there is a lot of noise on race day and in the week leading up to it. Like, don't listen to the people who are checking the weather constantly, and don't listen to the people who are like talking about how the water's not going to be wetsuit legal. Like, you are ready no matter what, and you can keep telling yourself, and the more you keep telling yourself that, the more likely you are to believe it. And no matter what the conditions are, everyone will be racing the same course in the same conditions on race day. So like, you show up, you do what you are given. Like, it's I think that's something that I would love to see more people really working on, is like getting themselves mentally prepared to tune out the bad and make sure that what they're receiving from themselves is positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you pointed this out, like, to me, I think like a year and a half ago, and you had pointed out that I had developed some pretty negative, like, scripts while I was out training.
Yeah.
Like while I was out on like runs and rides and things like that. And you were like, I think you're training yourself to equate like training and racing with frustration and anger. And I was like, oh shit. And I think, yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, that could be a process goal for athletes, is like, I want to improve that self-talk around my training and my racing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How's that going, Chris?
It's actually going really well.
Oh, good.
Like it's something, like, at least like I know that it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that, because we don't, it usually takes like a coach or somebody to point out like, hey, like your backswing, it's really weird. Uh, like it takes that sort of outside perspective. I mean, this is one of the things that's so valuable about coaching, is like hearing an athlete talk about their process and then being like, hey, like, I don't think that's serving you. And, so now that I know that I do it, it's been really, really helpful to, when I notice I'm doing it, to do the thought stopping exercise and then focus on something positive.
Awesome. For as like an outsider too, I can see that when you come back from runs now, if we have a meeting right after, you seem a lot more relaxed than you used to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was realizing that instead of training becoming an outlet, it was merely becoming a place to focus more on the frustrations. And for a lot of us, even if we do have outcome goals, training is still a stress reliever.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is important to us. It's a place that we can go outside of our existences. And yeah, I mean, so that is now a pretty regular process goal for me, is focus on the task at hand, focus on the positive aspects of it. Don't get sucked into, future tripping or, anger.
Very important.
Okay. So we're already 30 minutes in, everybody. We're going to now talk about some of the big goal setting strategies that happen out there. We hope that as you're watching this and listening to it, maybe in the future, that maybe press pause and write down an outcome goal, a performance goal, and a process goal that you would really like to attend to this coming year. Since this is a live show, we are not going to pause and allow you to do that in real time. But either think about jotting some of those down after the show, or while we continue to yammer on about goal setting strategies, think about what you want to accomplish in 2021. Okay, so Molly, we've got 3 different goal setting strategies on here. There's probably 10 times that number. But why don't you take us through SMART goals?
Okay. SMART goals are something that I know are a little they're very overused. I think at this point, people are like, yeah, I get it. But they're also very close to my heart as somebody who came from program design and evaluation. You can't set a goal if you can't measure it, and you can't set a goal if you can't achieve it. So SMART goals are going to be simple, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based is what they're normally. But Chris has a strong preference, which I agree with, for simple, measurable, adjustable, realistic, and time-based, because you do need to be able to adjust goals. And frankly, that A is kind of redundant with the achievable and realistic. It just seems like those are both saying the same things. So for an example of that would be that you want to improve your threshold power by 5% over the next 3 months, or that you want to extend your time to exhaustion to 60 minutes over the next 3 months. Have a deadline, have a thing that you can measure, a thing that you can plot your success against, and recognize how close you're getting to your goal.
If you can't get it in a sentence, I was just going to say, if you can't get it in a sentence, it's not simple.
That's a really good point.
Any other things on SMART? What are some of the SMART goals that you've seen athletes posting for you, or what are some SMART goals that you've worked on with athletes to come up with?
So I have an athlete who was, I think like everyone else, is just really busy during the last couple of months. And so her goal over the last, since she joined one of the gyms that has an outdoor pool in Portland, and so her goal was really to get to the pool 3 times a week for the next month. And that was, it's time limited. It's something that she could absolutely do. It didn't mean that she was going to be there for 90 minutes doing a 4,000 yard red mist set. But just get to the pool 3 times a week and establish that routine. And that ended up with her being able to, go for longer swims, find more time in her schedule, trying to but if she had just said I'm going to swim more, then what's that do? Nothing. It does a whole lot of nothing.
We need to come up with an acronym that's dumb, that, that incorporates all of the things that SMART is not.
A dumb goal.
Yeah, yeah,
Work on that,
like,
audience.
yeah, exactly. Vague,
Derpy,
yeah, not time limited. This is going to be
unachievable,
right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This is
Molly.
unrealistic. Set in stone. Yeah, you guys get it. Like, yeah, I mean, I love the like, yeah, like I'm going to swim 3 times a week over the next month.
Hmm.
Perfect. Like that's the kind of thing that we're after.
For sure. What's the next type of goal?
Okay, this one is a manifestation goal. I threw this in here and I felt a little like, oh, this is a little hippy dippy, but it was very nice of Molly to say like, no, there's actually really good science around this. But I will do this with an athlete when like that athlete is kind of stuck when we're thinking about next year, and I'm like, okay, like what are the goals? Like what do you want to do? And you kind of get a like get faster answer. And in that case, I'll sort of say like, okay, I want you to imagine that it is exactly 1 year from today. And so I was doing a bunch of, end of year stuff in December. And so I'd say to an athlete, okay, I want you to imagine that it is December 15th, 2021. It is exactly 365 days from now. We're having the same meeting. What are you proud of achieving in the previous 365 days? And I think it's really important to get them to phrase it as if they were a year in the future. So to make them say like, oh, I'm really proud of the fact that I shaved 20 minutes off of my marathon time. I'm really, really happy that I got to the pool 3 times a week in January. And you know what? It turns out that after that, I got to the pool 3 times a week every month for the rest of the year. And so really like asking the athlete what is the thing that's going to make them proud a year from now usually finds your way to that like secret goal that I think a lot of the time that athletes are either like nervous about saying, or they don't even realize that it's the thing behind that, like, I want to get faster at my sport.
Absolutely. I think along those lines too, like we say that races are training is not a rehearsal for race day. But it is a great time to visualize a little bit and use some visualization for manifestation. Every run I've done over a year now, it'll be 2 years by the time Canada happens, if it happens, like every run, I see myself looking strong on the marathon, like every single time. And it really does carry over. Like I did it for Lake Placid and had my best marathon ever in Lake Placid at that point. It makes a huge difference to see yourself being successful and to like visualize success. Yeah. Practice that manifestation.
All right, type number 3, progressive. We're probably going to have to bat this one back and forth for a bit because there's a lot here. But what are progressive goals? Like, what is this term? What is this strategy?
So progressive goals work backward from that big picture goal. So what's a big picture goal that might be important for an athlete?
I'm going to pick on one of my particular athletes who goes by the initials SG, and SG has a goal to qualify for Kona by 2022.
Okay. So if that is the big goal for 2022, how does that inform the goals that SG sets for the midterm, for the medium term? So like this season.
Got it. SG's got like a swimming thing. SG kind of struggles in the water, has done well in the pool, but has trouble getting out into the open water and then seeing those same times occur. So setting like a goal of swimming 70 to 75 minutes for 3.8K this year, either in the pool. I would be ecstatic if it happened open water, but because we've got 2 seasons to do it, that sort of interim step of, okay, SG swims like, best Ironman swim is in the low 120s. If conditions have been rough, it's gone up as high as in the 140s. So we really need to get it more into the ballpark of that 70 to 75 minutes, because when SG really tries to qualify for Kona, that swim time is going to have to be around 65 minutes. That's just what it takes. So this season, that's what we would focus on, is getting time for 3.8K, 70 to 75 minutes. Any athlete who's going to qualify for Kona, a lot of that happens on the bike. And so building SG's bike volume to the point where they are holding 10 to 12 hours per week over the whole year, like make that engine big and robust. And then run 135 off of the bike for 70.3. If SG is going to qualify for Kona, that marathon time is, needs to be in the kind of like 310 to 325 range for SG's age group. So this year, if we can hit 135 and a 70.3, we're really headed in the right direction. So those are like sort of the medium long-term goals. All right. So Molly, I'm going to turn it around now. So we've got a big goal 2 years out. We've got what we want to accomplish in terms of performance goals for this year. What are some like medium short-term goals that SG might focus on?
So I would try to break that down into monthly. A month is a good medium short-term for people to accomplish. It's not something you do right now, but it's also not something, it's the building blocks of a longer season. And I think that for this particular athlete, who I think that if they can accomplish the things that you've mentioned in that last part, they should absolutely be somebody who's a Kona contender. But so for the bike especially, riding significantly longer, so aiming for a goal of 40 hours for a month, focusing on extending time to exhaustion could be a monthly goal. Also focusing on hand entry during swim workouts, to erase like any form, like to focus on the form correction that's going to be most meaningful for them to bring that swim time down. And then especially for runners, if people are going to be doing a lot more run volume, if they're going to be running a lot off the bike, if they're going to be, if they're prone to hip flexor tightness or any other kind of like issue that can show up in triathletes, really working on posterior chain and having the goal of doing those posterior chain exercises for 23 out of 31 days, to help establish some of the run cadence goals that could help for the running 135 off the bike and a 70.3, which sounds so fast. Where do we go from there though? So we've got some monthly goals. Is that enough?
I mean, it could be enough, but it's often really nice to then take that final step down. And those of you that come to morning routine, you might be like, wait a second, this sounds very familiar. And yeah, like I think Molly and I could retitle the company Magpie Coaching, because nothing's new. It's something you learn after your first theme party. So we're going to break it down now into some weekly goals. And these weekly goals are great because they can change over the course of that month. So say SG is going to aim for those 40 hours of total riding in the course of the month, but maybe from week to week, there isn't like a riding associated goal. So this particular week, maybe SG has ends up staying up watching Netflix too often. And so we're going to set a goal, like let's go to bed every night this week before 10 p.m. That's going to help everything. And then fueling effectively before SG's big ride on Saturday with like a ton of sweet spot intervals. So like really, really making sure that SG is doing that fueling effectively to perform on that workout. That's a good process goal that probably will show up on race day. If you practice your fueling, it will happen when you're competing. And then a performance goal of like hitting a certain heart rate for SG's hard run workout on Wednesday. You could get even more granular. You could set goals for individual workouts. You can set goals for individual sets of workouts. And I bet you actually already do this. But having this kind of structure where the short-term goals feed the medium-term goals, feed the long-term goals, eventually ends up with you arriving, where you were headed in the first place.
I also think that there's a real benefit in when you're establishing those, probably especially like the monthly goals, those like medium short term goals, that there's a huge benefit to allowing some flexibility and some room for like imperfect adherence. I think that having the goal of doing your posterior chain exercises 23 out of 31 days is a really strong goal because it allows for some days where it's just not going to fit, and that's really maybe not something you should be doing every day, like in order to get the best out of it. But I think that a lot of people have a goal of perfection, and the problem with that is that if you have one imperfect day, that streak gets broken. Several years ago, I did Weight Watchers, and one of the things that I really loved about that was that there were like points that you were accumulating throughout the course of a week, and it didn't mean that you had to have every day being perfect. It was like you want a good week, you don't want a perfect existence. And I think holding yourself to perfection is difficult, but it also creates failure where failure wasn't necessary. And I think that you can still be successful in your monthly goals without having like perfect day-to-day adherence. And I think that having some room in there for days that like you really are just gonna go to sleep, like you needed to that extra 30 minutes of sleep is going to be much more important to you than doing that posterior chain work.
Yeah, I mean, it's like such a good, it's such a good argument for being. It's like when we talked to Marissa Michael about intuitive eating, that like all of these goals are great, but the moment that they like lead you into rigid or obsessive thinking, it's probably time to like listen to your body that is crying out for you to like, please don't keep doing your posterior chain exercises every single day, because your muscles are tired.
Yeah, a really embarrassing truth of that is I got pretty obsessed with my closing the rings on my Apple Watch, to the point that like, and my friends can tell you, like we were on a trip in Sedona, like a girls' trip in Sedona. And like we went out for margaritas, and like I got back and I was like, my move ring isn't closed. And so I like hit the exercise timer and I was like doing jumping jacks, like, and they were like, what's wrong with you? Like, but it broke my streak. And that's why I think that like, at 360 days out of 365, that streak was broken. And so now like I didn't achieve my goal. Like that felt like failure. But it's not. Like I had 360 days of exercise and movement, which is probably too much. But yeah, have some room for life to get in the way.
Yeah, let some of those boxes on your training peaks be orange or oh good lord, red.
God forbid.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's with so many of these things, like we are triathletes are like so goal oriented and we pride ourselves on being like type A personalities because like we think that it means that we get more things done or whatnot. But like, yeah, I mean, compulsive thinking is a real problem in this sport, because so much of the sport is set up to support that. I mean, think about, I mean, think about Headspace. So like it tracks your meditation streaks. Think about, I mean, all of the kind of social media things are really trying to get you to do a habitual behavior again and again. It's not necessarily all in your best interest.
Streak is a good way to lead to obsession, I think.
Totally. Okay, we're, as always, like this hour is tearing past. We're going to talk a little bit about triggers, rewards, and something called stacking. So Molly, we said we were going to come back to this at the beginning from this imaginary athlete who really wants to go swim in the morning. The only time that she can get a lane reservation is 6 a.m. But like she really, really struggles with getting out of bed when the alarm clock goes off. So what's a way for this? What are some of the ways for this hypothetical athlete to start changing that behavior so that she can hit that goal of getting to the pool 3 or 4 times a week in the morning?
So I think one of the important things here is to try to figure out what the trigger is for that behavior that you want to change. So the behavior is not getting out of bed, missing your 6 a.m. swim time. What's the trigger for that? So instead of getting up and going to the pool, which is the ritual that they would like to establish, instead she always hits snooze, which is the old ritual, and sleeps as long as possible, which is the beautiful reward.
So it's not a bad cycle.
And I just want to state for the record, sometimes it's the right answer. Like
exactly, yeah. Totally.
So
yeah,
now
all previous caveats apply.
Exactly. So now she puts her goggles on top of her alarm clock when she goes to bed. When she reaches for the snooze button in the morning, instead, she finds a reminder of that goal. Her beautiful, brand new Speedo Vanquisher goggles with the pink ones with the like light lenses, because swimming with dark lenses is something that makes you sad. It's true. Maybe that's enough. That's going to like interfere with that trigger enough to let you like swing your legs out of bed, put that alarm on snooze, hopefully, and change that trigger and like change that, like get to the new ritual that you want to achieve.
Yeah. So like you're out of bed on the way to the pool. By the time you're driving, like it's unlikely that you're going to like go back and get into bed. But then the way that we like really bake in the new ritual is that we establish some kind of new reward system. Because if you don't give yourself any kind of reward, the siren song of the sleep in will continue to haunt you. It will just sit there being like, come back to bed.
Right. It's warm and dry.
Exactly. Right. You don't have to get in the water. You don't have to get cold. You don't have to exert yourself. And so we're going to replace that reward, the stay in bed as long as possible, with some kind of new reward. So trigger happens, alarm goes off, reminder with the goggles, go do the swim. What are some rewards that we can toss at hypothetical swimmer to really make this stick?
So I think one way to do this is to try to think about like, so you know that the first couple of days of doing this, the first couple of weeks, the first maybe month or so of doing this is going to be really hard. Like you're going to get out of bed, you're going to go to the pool, you're going to be like, meh. Most days, like some days you'll probably be like, I'm so proud of myself and look at me being a champion all day. And that is its own reward. Enid, that's exactly what I was going to say. I just looked over at chat for like the first time all hour and Enid was like fancy coffee. Which is exactly what I was going to say. So like maybe every time you get out of bed for that swim, you go to Starbucks on the way home and get yourself a fancy coffee, or like, put $5 into a jar for, something that you want, like make it a big thing so that you have to keep doing it for a really long time, but like not a $5 thing, but
like the $5 like builds over time. Molly's avoiding my examples because they're outlandish and bizarre.
Wait, hang on, I didn't see. Oh wait, so Chris says every time that you get $5 into your slot car fund, bonsai tree reserve, or donut bank. Now, I'm a fan of the donut bank myself. Slot cars, I'm not super into. Bonsai trees, I wish someone would do for me, but I'm probably not going to spend my money on it. But donut bank, you're speaking my language.
Got it. I picked an example from each of my existing athletes.
I know who the slot car person is.
Nice. Perfect. What's this last thing called stacking?
So I think this one is, I really like this idea actually. This is a little bit different, but it's the idea of attaching a new habit to one that you already have. I need to do my physical therapy every day, so I try and beat the coffee maker, which is something that is certainly going to go off. Like as soon as, and now I'm just talking as Chris Bagg, but like as soon as I wake up in the morning, I run to the coffee maker and make sure that the coffee maker is doing its thing, because that is the only way the day is going to start. That's the only way the sun's going to come up. That's the only way that like anything is going to happen. So maybe then, instead of trying to make a special time to do your physical therapy, you take that already ingrained habit, like the sprint to the coffee maker that's going to take a little bit of time, and use that to be the trigger for your PT exercises. So now visualize Chris Bagg lying on the floor in his kitchen, waiting for the coffee maker to be done and furiously doing his hip exercise.
Yeah. Well, because the coffee maker, like that's a really good coffee maker, and it makes a pot of coffee in just around 4 minutes and 40 seconds.
Oh,
and that is enough time to get through 3 sets of like 20 like hip exercises. And for me, like it's very hard for me to like carve out the time to be like, I'm going to go and set aside half an hour a day to do my PT. And so I end up never doing it. And so if I end up doing five minutes a day, 6 days a week, like that's great. Like that's like when you're doing strength work, density and frequency is much more important than like, a crushing 2-hour gym session. And so, yeah, stacking something that I've really found helpful for like habit development, because like, that's all we're really talking about here. We're talking about changing your habits so that the goals that you're setting become possible. Like you can say 1,000,000 times, like, I'm going to write 90 minutes every day. You can set that goal again and again and again, but until you set up the conditions that allow that to be habitual, it's never going to be something that you do all the time.
I also want to give a little bit of a warning here for not interpreting stacking as multitasking. So for example, I really tried to combine some of the coach education that I've really been wanting to do with my bike workout. So like I knew I was going to make time for my bike workout, but like, it's the listening to webinars and stuff like that is always something that I wish I did more of. So I was like, I'll just listen to this webinar on my bike, which maybe in the right circumstances, like an endurance spin or something, it's going to be a good idea. But for like an intensity ride, like that's just giving too little attention to the bike and too little attention to the education. So consider the environment that you're stacking in is all I want to say for that.
Yeah. Yeah, like it would be not a great move of me to combine like coffee making with like my desire to write the next great American novel, right? Like
in 4 minutes and 40 seconds.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I think like this is a good place to sort of finish where we started, which is that like with all of these goals, like caveats abound, and like make sure that you break any of these rules before you like hurt yourself or do something that is just not good for you or your environment.
I think that's a very important point. I don't think there is a more important point. But I do think that we owe a big shout out to, I'm sorry that I was bad at keeping an eye on chat. Thank you so much, Kirby and Enid, for your cheers. I'm sorry that I was distracted. I have a new setup here today, and I need to bring the chat. I need to make it bigger because I can't see it from so far away. But this has been really helpful for me. I think I'm going to go about my goal setting a little bit differently after thinking about all this stuff. I hope it was helpful for you guys as well. Chris, is there anything you want to hit on before we send these people home to go write in their journals and think about their goals?
Let's see. I could quickly tell them what's going on in the upcoming endurance school schedule.
Please do.
Come on back tomorrow morning for yoga with Amy VT. making the 2021 debut, 7:30. And then please come back and ride bikes with us on Thursday morning for our regular Zwift ride. It's going to be a big one. Come and join us. We've already got like 14 people coming. It's going to be so rad. So again, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but you need to make sure that you follow both me and Molly on Zwift to make sure that you're going to get invited. And Endurance Spin makes its triumphant return this coming Saturday, 8 a.m. Same thing, make sure that you follow both of us so that you can get invited. We've got those set up in Zwift. There is not yet a Facebook event for the Saturday spin, but I'll get that added. Next week on Detention, local professional athlete Fiona Moriarty is going to be joining us to talk about her 5th place finish at Ironman Florida in her debut Ironman last year. So she's going to join us and answer all of your questions. So put that on the calendar now. Tell all your friends, and please come back and join us in Detention next week.
Where you think about what you've done.
Exactly. We're trying out a whole bunch of taglines.
Yeah, we're working on our new t-shirts. But thank you guys. This has been super fun. It's always great to see you, and we will see you again tomorrow morning for Yoga with Amy VT. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.